Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. Your favorite and only host is here, John Avis. And I have a fantastic guest for you today. And this guest is going to talk about something that I think all of you need to hear, myself included. I think many of us need a wake-up call when it comes to this, and that is creating a really good work-life balance when you're just an entrepreneur, when you're a hustler, when you're go, 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 when you have a hustle grind mentality. And, it's one of those things where I know it, but it's just like one of those things you talk about, but rarely implement. I'm all about the idea of it, but I work all of the time. And I think that many of us as entrepreneurs, we have a very poor work-life balance, which creates stress, it creates anxiety, it creates regret. And I have a fantastic person that's going to talk about some of these things today because he was able to create that for himself while being a very successful entrepreneur. Now, before I bring him on, I just want to ask that all of you hit that subscribe button because you really do not want to miss some of the episodes that I have in the upcoming weeks. Just trust me on this. So with that being said, today I have the pleasure of welcoming on the show JM Ryerson. JM is a best-selling author, an incredible coach. He runs a very successful business, and he's just an all-around really great guy. His business life is great. His health is great. I mean, he's like ripped. His family life is great, but that wasn't always the case. He had to create that life, and he did it by working really, really hard. And today in this episode, he shares how he did it and how you can do it as well. We also talk about his book that is just crushing it all over the world right now. It's titled Let's Go Win, which is the same title as his company's. And his book is just all of the principles on success, happiness, balance that he learned over the years that he distilled down into the most useful and actionable strategies so that you can create whatever your dream life is, whatever that is for you. And it's fantastic. This was just a great interview, and I'm excited to bring him on. So please sit back, take notes, and enjoy the show. JM, welcome to the podcast, brother. It's great to have you on today. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
John, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's always good to interview a best-selling author. And so that is what I would like to focus the conversation on today, if it's all right with you, is your book, Let's Go Win. It's a bestseller on Amazon, tons of raving reviews. But obviously, before we get into that, one of the things that I really love to do is just have you share a little bit about your story, how and why you became an entrepreneur, and just a couple of the major experiences that led you to do what you do today.
All right. So why I became an entrepreneur, I was working for corporate right out of college, and I realized very quickly I didn't like being told when and where I had to be or how much I could make.
Yep.
And that was literally the only reason I ever looked at becoming an entrepreneur. And I became a 1099 and figured out like, oh, wait a minute, there's a business here. And the guy that hired me in, we actually ended up being business partners and took that kind of nationwide. But truth be told, I didn't plan on it that way. It just, when I did the interview, he goes, well, do you like to golf? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I golf every Friday. And that was pretty much all I had to hear. And I was like, let's go, man, I'm in. So that's how I got into being an entrepreneur. And I just loved it, man. I believe in what's called a results-only work environment. I really don't care about the amount of hours that you put in. I hope you can put in less hours and spend more family time than grind and grind and grind, because I that's just not how it is. Now, if you need to grind to get the result, cool, do that. Yep. But certainly that's not the way I want to live. And so it just led me down, 3 companies in the financial service world. Well, I'm a voracious reader. And what I found is like a lot of people don't love to read, although I know you do, but most people don't. And so the whole idea of the book actually initially started with, I want my kids to have a lot of knowledge, not from me, but from my parents, my grandparents, authors and mentors in my life. And I want to take the 30 books or so a year that I read, and I want to condense it and take the main ideas and put it into an easy read that they can take away. So that was the intent. And it was literally for my two sons. They're 15, 11 now.
Yep.
At the time the book came out, they were 8, and I think TJ was 12. So, and that just led into doing more coaching, and I love it, man. I truly, this platform, podcasting is one of my favorite things to do. Writing has become just such a passion of mine. So that's kind of where I'm at today.
That's awesome. So before we get into the main topic, what's like like your book obviously is a culmination of a lot of other books condensed down, which I'm sure some of the great books are in there, like your Think and Grow Rich. I mean, there's like the great books. But like, what's the main premise of your book?
The main premise, well, I start with vulnerability straight away, which scares a lot of people. And I understand why, because but it's just one of those things that was such a profound lesson for me in leadership in my companies to truly be the authentic self. But if I wrap it up with courage, fun, and transcend, and that's actually, if you see the bracelet on my wrist, that's the company values of Let's Go Win. And what I want my kids, because again, it was geared towards them. When I want them to show up in the world, I want them to be courageous. I want them to put themselves out there and go for it. And I want them to have a good time while doing it, because we're not on planet Earth all that long. We may as well have a good time. And then the transcend part, what that means to me is overcome self-limiting beliefs. So at any point, let's say even as their dad, I say, you can't do something. I want them to look at me, give me the middle finger and say, I can do anything I want. That's the lesson I want them to learn, because so many of our hardwires, the things that we learned along the way, that's just stuff that was passed down generationally. So maybe you have a crappy relationship with money. Cool. That stinks that was passed down, but that doesn't mean you have to be stuck there. And so any self-limiting beliefs that somehow I have passed down to my kids, I want them to know they can overcome. They are not the label that even I may have put on them or my wife have. We don't mean to, right? As parents, we want to do our very best, but sometimes the information we were given at the time isn't the best in the future. And so that's where I end it with being transcend is I want people to know you can do anything you choose to do. And choice is the main premise. As I have reflected back, everything we do in life is a choice. Where you are today, that is a product of your choices, and you get to own that, good, bad, or indifferent. That is, so I guess the overall, I know I gave you 4 things, but really, if I were to summarize most succinctly, it would be choose and wherever you're at today, that's a choice, and that's on you.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the things that I really love that you just said there is just thinking about the next generation. I feel like a lot of people don't do that. The politicians and just people in general, they're so focused on me and what can I get, that because I have 3 kids and I'm just like, man, like so few people are like, because I'm just like, man, I just wish this generation would like, look, why don't we just own up for all of the mistakes and be the generation of working your butt off to set the next generation up. But it's like, they're just like, well, let's just pass it down the line. And somebody's eventually going to have to pay that price. And that's a whole different conversation, but I just like that you're thinking that far ahead, what example am I being for the kids? Which brings me obviously to the topic that I wanted to focus on. Cause I love research. I like reading like you. I probably read similar amount of books every year. But one of the things in your bio that really stood out to me was that you coach a lot of people on work-life balance. And as an entrepreneur myself, running 3 companies, having 3 kids, a million plates spinning at all times, I'm always excited to hear from someone who was where I am today and figured out a solution and can teach others, from their own personal experiences. So I have to ask you first and foremost, because there's a lot of myths out there, like what does work-life balance like mean to you?
It's a great question. I have a simple form that I provide, and I actually do it every month to check in, because here's what happens. And I've heard people say balance, that doesn't make sense. And they get harmony, I've heard. And I'm like, look, I don't really care what word or verbiage you use. Here's the deal. If your relationship is out of whack, guess what? You can't show up as the best professional or father or whatever hat you're wearing in that moment. But here's probably the best example I can give. And this is, I'm generalizing, but most of the females I work with, one of the biggest lessons I talk to them about is you are being selfish because you're not taking care of yourself first. And that lesson is like, they hate when I say the word selfish to them. Literally, you see this visceral response. They clench, and it's like, screw you, JM. Like, but the truth is, every amazing mother and woman that I've spent time with, they operate from this mindset of, I'm going to take care of everyone first.
That's right.
And if you think about that for a moment, it's actually a really selfish thing, because that doesn't allow for longevity. Your shelf life is not great. Let's just go with health. If you're not getting up and taking care, how can you be long-term taking care of those babies that you so love, or your husband or your family? And that maternal drive, although it's amazing, I just want them to just for a moment think, let's take care of ourselves first. So that would be an example of having work-life balance. Take care of you so you can show up with all those plates spinning as your number one. Here's another example, and this is one that I see in marriages all the time.
Yeah.
Let's say you love to golf, and I'm like, hey, John, your hobby's golf? Cool. I can't afford the time to spend golf to go golf. And I'll say, John, does golf really fill your bucket? Yes. John, you can't afford not to go golf, because I promise you, the way you're showing up in your marriage or with your kids, if you haven't filled that hobby bucket, you're not showing up as your best self. And so again, and my wife and I had to really communicate through this, because again, I am a guy that loves to go golf, fish. I mean, I'll go all day. And obviously there's a bit of a balance there too, right? That may be too much as a family guy, but I need to fill that hobby bucket. But that took a while, man, to really understand in our marriage. Like, I'm not being my best version because I'm just grinding at work, changing diapers, doing all the things that we do. You have to take care of you. So I hope that answers your question, but that's really how I look at it.
Well, I want to why do you think that is? The best financial advice I ever received was pay yourself first. And it's the same thing, right? It's like, why do we operate? And maybe the answer is like, why do we operate from let's sacrifice ourselves to do everything else, instead of what you just talked about? It's like, pay yourself first, take care of yourself first, make sure you're good so that your cup's full so that you can pour into others. Like, why do you think most people operate that way, just like subconsciously?
Yeah, I think first off, I think that's generationally coming down. The generations before us, look, they didn't do these things. Yeah. And look at again, whether it be divorce rate or substance abuse or some of the challenges, even the length of life of living, because they didn't do these things. They were some of the hardest working generations prior. My dad, my grandfather, I admire and respect how hard they worked. However, did they take care of themselves? Did they truly have that balance so that they can show up as the best, again, parent, lover, husband, whatever that is. So I think that's part of it. But specific to the money, great advice. I tell you what, if they don't hear anything else, I love what you said. Pay yourself first. It is the best advice you can give anybody. It's been hardwired. Marketing companies, it's all about spending your discretionary money first, or actually paying your bills first, then discretionary money, then paying yourself. And it should go in reverse. It goes, pay yourself first, then your bills, and then whatever you have left over, go have some fun with. But anyway, I think so often, again, as a consumer, guess what? They want us buying stuff. And so it's not really supporting what you just said, although that is literally amazing financial advice right there.
Hey, you spent years and years in that industry. So everybody, you heard it, not just from me, but from someone who actually has been in that industry for a very long time. I think too, that it's just a lot of the role models are just work, sacrifice. And, we look at them as our role models, but chances are many of them, and most of them, don't have any kind of healthy life outside of like work and career. And so we just adopt that, I think. And it's just like, my favorite is just following The Rock on Instagram. I mean, I love it. I mean, he's the hardest worker in the room. Obviously, he seems to have more balance than others, but it's just crazy. And the reason, JM, I wanted to spend some time here today on this topic is because I think one of the major things that I've learned in this last year is how important mental health is. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, including me, were out there burning the candle at both ends. And then COVID hit, And it just removed the veil on a lot of people. You know, people became isolated, people's routines were disrupted, and they just got a reality check on not only how fragile life is, but what's really important and how we all need connection. And so I just wanted to ask you, you know, like not only what is work life balance, but for somebody listening to this and they're already off the deep end, man. They're at work. They have zero balance in their life. Like, what are some things that they can do to just start to move that needle in the direction they want it to go?
So I always start with health because without health, there you have nothing. So health is wealth is the saying I use all the
Mm,
time. Your health is wealth. And let me give you an example. So early in my entrepreneur career, there was a real badge of honor to burn the candle at both ends,
yeah.
right? I mean, I was like, oh, I prided myself on getting 4 hours of sleep and how amazing that was. That's ridiculous. There's a study out there, and I'm forgetting the doctor, but he's like, look, there is 0.001% of the population that can actually sustain a healthy lifestyle on 4 hours. The rest of us, we need 6 to 8. There's a cancer sweep. And again, this is not my expertise, but when I heard that years ago,
Yep.
I realized the detrimental thinking I was doing towards my 60-year-old, 70-year-old self. And so again, I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see them have kids. I want to be a grandfather. These are goals of mine. So the way I was living in the present moment was completely contradictory to what some of my long-term goals were. And so I think so often it's just a lack of the information and some of the peer pressure, if you will, or certainly you see rise and grind. Well, look, think about it. If you grind and grind, what does that what happens? It turns into dust and it goes away. So grinding ourselves over and over, I don't want to go away. I want to be here for a long time. And I also want to be the best example for my boys. So I don't want them to look and say, oh, dad was the best dad ever. He was around. Actually, when was dad around? I don't want them to do that. I want them to see that dad did, work, but he was also at my ball games, that he was able to do these things. Because being a father, if you were to ask my parents years ago, when I was like 5 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a dad. So for me, being a dad, it would only make sense to show up at those ball games and have a business that provides for the family. It's not one or the other for me. It's got to be both. Otherwise, I will have to reevaluate my goals. So anyway, I think for me, having kids really brought levity to the conversation to say,
Yeah.
I need to set an example for them. Also, I want to be at 50 years old and still be able to play ball with my kids. That's a goal of mine. And so that means my health has to be on point, which means I have to work out. I have to eat properly. And it all is a domino effect. If you think about it, what are your goals? And then you start looking at, is this in line with my health, with my hobby, with my intimate relationships? Am I taking care of those? If you're not, that's okay. Stop and reevaluate.
See, that's such good advice. Like I can't remember what study that I read, but it was so on point with what you just said. It's like this guy, he went to a business coach and he was like, his business was falling apart and he was like super out of shape and everything. And he was super pissed because the business coach put him on like a workout diet regimen. And he's just like, that's not what I came to you for. But it was like what he was doing was changing his self-image and his confidence. And in turn, once he did it, his business actually changed. It took off and it's like it bled into everything else. And that's why I think it's so powerful is like, just to reiterate for all the listeners, if everything is falling apart, if you have no work-life balance, focus on health because that thing will spill over into everything else and how you view it. Man, great advice. So what are some of the things other than obviously reading 30 books a year? You know, Tony Robbins said it best, like the key to fulfillment is growth and contribution. Like what are some of the things that you do to grow and continually shape your mindset?
So I know it sounds so cliche. Everybody says it right now, but it's so important, which is I journal every single day.
Ooh,
I
that's good.
meditate every single day. And to give the most basic advice that I would tell people, because if to ask somebody to do my morning routine, or you mentioned Tony Robbins, his morning routine is substantial, brother. It takes a while.
Yep.
So to ask somebody to do that would be a little crazy, honestly. If I asked my clients to do everything I do, I'm setting them up for failure because it took a long time to develop the patterns that I've found to be at my very best. So my best piece of advice on this, John, is there's three things you have to take care of every single day: your mind, your body, and your soul. Everybody gets the body part, right? We've heard you got to exercise, take care of, eat right. That has been beat into us. So I think people understand that. Cool. Now the mind part. So for instance, I read at least a minimum of 10 pages a day. Usually that spills into 20, 30. If I'm into a great book, it's 100 pages and I'm like, oh shoot, I have other things I better do. But that's part of taking care of my mind. I also do Lomosity. It's a very easy app that I do brain games because one of my, probably an irrational fear, but dementia and Alzheimer's is something I want to avoid. And doing these brain games, if you look at it, 30% less if you read daily, 40% less if you do brain games. It's like 70% less if you take dance lessons. So that was a weird one. I'd never heard that, but it's pretty cool. So taking care of the mind, that's just some pieces there. And then taking care of the soul, that is different for everyone. Some people that's reading the Bible. Some people it's going to church. For me, it is meditation or walking. Those are the two that really go hand in hand. Taking a hike, I really don't care, but really what fills that soul part of you. And that could be looking at oceans. That could be, it doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong answer to it. But if you take care of those three things every single day, what will surprise you is how much, to your point, the domino gets tipped over. So I helped a guy, I'm not a nutritionist or a weight loss coach, but I helped a guy lose 70 pounds. Okay. Now, what happened? He did improve in business. He found that intimate relationship he didn't have. Now his friendships have grown, changed, right? Some of the friends he was hanging out with weren't necessarily who he is today, and now when you talk to him, there's just a glow about him. But it all started with just some simple habits daily to get his weight to the place that he felt comfortable with, which boosted his self-confidence, self-esteem. And he's an amazing man that has done all the work. Literally, I just gave him a couple tools and he ran with it.
That's so cool. I was going to ask you that. I'd love to have you share another one on top of this one. Just a really cool story of somebody that you've coached that experienced a really powerful breakthrough, like right in front of you. Is there like any really cool story outside of the one that you just shared that you're just like, wow, like what people are really capable of is just incredible?
Yeah, so I work with golfers. For some reason, they've been attracted, I guess, because there's such a mindset part to the golf game.
Yep.
In a very similar situation, although I cannot say his golf game has radically shifted with me. And so that's a challenge that I'm trying to figure out. But what has happened, his personal relationships have blossomed since we've worked together. And so what's amazing because it's hard there's a tangible result you can see with somebody losing 70 pounds. It's like, okay, there's the metric. But when you change a mindset, it's their actions. It's the people surrounding them. And when their mom and dad call me, or I got to actually meet his parents in Phoenix, and they give me this hug, never met them before. And they say, thank you. What you've done for my son is remarkable. And here's the hard part. I take that in because one thing I've learned is when somebody gives you a compliment, just say thank you. Don't belittle it or justify it. Just, thank you. But when they say that, it's hard for me not to say, but just remember, he or she did all the work. Because the truth is, you're just a guide. I've guided them on a couple simple principles. They did all the real work. They're the ones that have to follow through, be accountable every single day. But to watch him find the love of his life and what that's doing for him personally and mentally, it's just really cool to see because he is such an amazing man to begin with. I just don't know if he knew it. Right. And so it's once you bring that out and they start to flourish, you're like, the world needs to see you, brother. Like they have to see you shine. And now that some of the work we've done, he's doing that. And now he's attracted his soulmate. And to see him from what he was when I started to where he is now, in terms of just confidence, in terms of his wholeness, it's night and day. But again, I cannot take credit for it. It's the work he did with a couple small changes.
That's super cool. I want to backtrack just a second because I have this question. So when it comes to meditation, How do you do it? What do you do? How long do you do it? I'm starting to get into this myself now, and I think a lot of people skip the meditation part. It's like they'll do it. Oh, you know what? I'll join a gym. I'll buy this. I'll do this. I'll work out. But it's like something like meditation. I know I did personally for years and years, and I just never even bothered. I'm just like, I'll fall asleep because I have ADHD. But I'm really curious because some of the most successful people that I know on this planet swear by meditation as if like it's the most important thing. And so I'm just curious as to like how you meditate and what you do and how long you do it for.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple tools for those to make it easier. And then I'll tell you my own journey. So Headspace is a good one. Calm is a good one. Insight Timer is a really rad one that's come out recently. So if you're looking for guided or even just a timer, they have those options. For me, and my journey was, I used to say 10 minutes a day. And here's what's so ridiculous. At some point, if I didn't have 10 minutes to meditate, I just wouldn't do it. Right. And it's like, wait a minute, how backwards is that? That if I can't get that magical 10 minutes, I'm just not going to do it at all. The moment I changed my goals, because I put all my goals in my bathroom mirror, so I see them, so I remind myself what to do. I just say meditate daily. I could be driving down the freeway and I could be meditating. It's just shifting your mindset. And really, you could argue it's mindfulness, being in the present moment, but being aware, being self-aware of your thoughts, what's happening, slowing everything down. That is what I consider meditation. So I do box breathing as a form of meditation. I do Tumo breathing as a form of meditation. So my answer to you is I do guided. I do sometimes where it's just silence. I do Tumo meditation. All of these things are different ones, and it just depends what I'm needing that moment. So the biggest thing I would tell people is don't be afraid of it. Don't label, I have ADHD or I can't do this. I can't slow down my mind. Guess what? No one can. Right. You could literally be enlightened, and I promise you, there's still thoughts going through your head. They just have a better, gentle way of saying, I hear you. I hear the thought and I push it to the side. And the biggest thing I would tell people is not woo-woo. It's not scary. Just slow down. Just be with yourself for a little bit. And if you can do that, you will find answers without you necessarily even looking for them. They appear. And so it's just such an amazing tool that you can use, whether driving in the subway, on the couch, when my kids are driving me crazy. And I know, look, the days are long, but the years are short. I slow down and say, it's really not that big a deal. I'll meditate real quick and then boom, I'm back with them. So it's a tool that I use all the time, but don't put any parameters, just meditate.
I love that. I love that. So I just have a couple other questions for you, man. You've given a lot of nuggets in this interview. I mean, it's only been like 25 minutes and crushing it. But one of the things that I was curious about, and it's in line with what we've already talked about. When I research guests, I try not to just look at their accolades, but like the whole person. That means a lot to me. I've interviewed lots of people that are very successful financially, huge companies, and deep down I'm interviewing them and I focus the entire interview on financial because I know everything else is falling apart from what I've looked at. But, you have what I think most people would define as a really successful life. You have a great business. It's thriving. You and your wife, you work together. She's your chief marketing officer. You have 2 kids. Your relationship, seems to be extremely strong. You have a business where you do what you love. You make great money doing it. And every day, the life that you've built forces you to be in a situation where you have to continuously grow and contribute. And I think most people would look at that and say, man, that's like a perfect life, right? Like that's where I want to be. So like, they don't have to have kids, but like, other than just like the decisions and awareness, because I feel like you couldn't have got there by accident. It had to be planned out, worked on every single day. Like, how can people bridge that gap? We've covered health, but are there some other things that you do strategy wise? There's some things that you read, some things that you listen to that have helped you put together what you have and the way that your day is and the way that your weeks and your month are?
Well, first off, thank you. And you do an incredible job researching. I'm listening to you and I do podcasts, guys, and I am amazed at the depth of your knowledge. So, brother, that's incredible. And the way you ask questions is awesome as well. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. Specific to it's a mindset. And when Carol Dweck brought out growth or mindset is the name of the book, the growth mindset versus fixed mindset back in 2006. I remember looking and saying, do I have a growth mindset? And in some areas I really did, but in others I had a very fixed, which by the way, we all do. And I still do today. But my point in saying that when I looked at when she put the definitions behind growth and fixed, what I realized is so often we will tell ourselves, oh, I'm there or I've accomplished X. I don't believe anything is ever accomplished. I don't think that my relationship is, look, it was great yesterday, but I have to work at it today to make sure it's great today, or my business, or my relationship with my kids. It doesn't matter if we've had it with my son, 15 years of amazing relationship. I have to show up and be my very best today.
Right.
And so once I figured that part out, it just makes it easier. That doesn't mean that I don't have negative dialogue. My dialogue is a real jerk sometimes. And I have to push that guy to the side, guy or gal, and be like, hey, man, stop it. And so when it comes to the mindset, I think to answer your question, because no one has a perfect life, first off, that doesn't exist, right? We all have problems. And thank God, because that means you're alive. And that means that you can really feel like, oh, yes, I just got my butt kicked at the gym. Like I should celebrate that. I just got a flat tire on the road. I should celebrate that. But the truth is you do need to embrace the suck because that means you're alive. Yep. And one of the things I have, and I think this will answer your question. I have daily reminders on my mirror right next to my goals. And those are the actions I want to show up as, not necessarily that they're innate or that I naturally do. And keep perspective is one of those. And in parentheses, it says Dick Fong. Well, who the heck is Dick Fong? Dick Fong is my brother-in-law that passed away at 48 of esophageal cancer, has 3 beautiful daughters that he didn't get to see, grow up. That is the perspective I want to keep every single moment. I wish he was here every day because he was an incredible man. But I know that Dick wants to have the challenges or the problems, quote unquote, that I have today. And so that is some of the mindset, but that I keep, so that I can have the life that I want to live. And so that perspective piece is something that I need to remind myself with all the time. The growth mindset thing to always be a growth mindset. And another one I have is be a leader at all times. That one's really hard because so often being a leader means also being a follower, shutting my mouth and listening to my wife or kids. Right.
Right.
And so I think it's just reminding ourselves we've never achieved it. We're not there. We're a work in progress. And every single day I want to wake up and I want to show up as my very best self. Like this interview, I'm giving you everything I got. It may not be the best. It may be awesome. I don't know, but I promise you this, I'm going to give you everything I have and feel really good about it.
So really, really great wisdom. And I think everybody's going to love it. And there's a billboard, I think, that exudes what you're saying right now. It's like this huge, but it's like rinse, do every day. It's like, and it's true, right? Like you've never arrived, right? It's like you got to pay those dues every day. You work on it. So just a really great perspective, especially, with your brother-in-law. Where's your wife? What's her nationality?
She is half Thai and half Chinese. So we call her Chinese or Chai, whatever. No, she is, she's, yeah, it's a very cool mix. And she's a beautiful woman. So
that's awesome. Yeah. My wife's half Filipino. So I know it's love just the Asian ethnicity, like just all of the culture and like the thing that I love most is just their family, like I grew up here and was born in Kentucky. Our family's just kind of all spread out and they're all doing their own thing. And, we'll go to Chicago and my wife's family, it's like, man, they're like 50 of them together and it's like the best time ever. And I don't have that in my family. So it's just really, really cool. So I was just curious. So, man, JM, this is a great interview. I just have 2 final questions. The first question is you do a lot of coaching, you speak on a lot of stages, and typically when you have helped as many people as you have helped in your life, there's like an overarching message that is like the main thing you want to get across to people, that if like they only get 60 seconds with you, it's like, man, this is what I need you to leave with. What is that message?
Well, I got to ask this question all the time. What's your superpower? And I don't know that I own one, but if I do, it would be keep things simple. I always try to take whatever it is and make it as simple as possible, because this life is already busy enough.
Yep.
And I hope when people listen, if I do impact them at all, they can take something really simple away and apply it. That would be my overarching message. If that one didn't get through, the other one would be just to be yourself, just to find your authentic self and bring that to the world, because there's so many amazing human beings that are in their shell and they're not showing the world who they are, and they deserve it to be out there. We deserve to see it. So if the first one, keep it simple, didn't get through, just be yourself and just love that authentic self.
I love it. Second question is can you just share with everybody that loves this interview, that wants to connect with you, follow your content, get your book, like where can they connect with you? Where can they follow what you're putting out into the world? And just where can they get well, obviously your book's on Amazon, but could you just, and I'll put it all in the show notes, but could you share your website and just where you're the most active on social media or wherever you're hosting most of your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So letsgowin.com is the website, and there's a coach course on there, that WorkLife Balance sheet that I was talking about. It's on there. Cool. It's free to you guys, so check it out. And then Let's Go Win 365 on any of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And we just try to make it as simple as possible. So I will say this, John, I hope people do reach out. I love to hear from people. It really does fill my soul when people, hey man, I heard this, and whether you agreed with me or not, it doesn't matter. I love to interact with human beings, especially new human beings, because there's such a big, vast world I want to connect with. So those would be probably the two best places to reach me.
Awesome. Now you also have an awesome podcast. Can you share that with everybody as well?
Yeah, sure. Let's Go Win podcast. We have John will be a guest. I can tell you that this will be reciprocal because you're awesome. But, former athletes, executives, I had two amazing dentists, by the way. Two of my favorite guests I've ever had were dentists. And I think to myself, why would a dentist be that interesting? They are fascinating, these two human beings. So it's just listening to their stories. And as you were saying, that's the idea of the podcast is I don't really want to talk necessarily about the accolades. I want the stories, man. I want to know how they got their butts kicked and they were able to overcome it. I want to know how they, created this mindset or this amazing company. So that's the idea. And it's a lot of fun, man. The guests are the show, and I just ask a couple questions and we run with it.
That's awesome. Well, JM, thank you for your time today. This was a great and insightful interview. And man, I hope to have you on in the future once you've published your next book as well, which I'm sure it's coming. Can't just write one book. But thank you for your time today. And thank you for pouring into everybody that listened.
Brother, thank you. I had a great time. Thank you so much, John.
Absolutely.